Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Aga Wilson Show. Today I have the honor to speak to Peter McCullough because in the last 24 hours something happened that I think shocked many people in our movement. Peter's Twitter account got suspended, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because this, of course, is a very serious issue for all of us, and especially because it does violate the freedom of speech. So Peter, welcome to the show, and yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about what happened and why you think that is.
Well, thanks for having me back on the program. It's great to join your audience. And over the last 3 years, I think the world has gotten to know me and doctors in my circle as sources of reliable, scientific, clinical information surrounding the pandemic, but also on so many other important topics. And my testimony has been relied on by the U.S. Senate, multiple state senates. Everything's in the record. And I've had a consistent record of tweeting from my personal Twitter account. Now, the backdrop for this is I previously had a group account called COVID-19 Treatments that was formed from the U.S. Senate panel in 2020. And that built up to about 20,000 followers and then was suspended by Twitter. I subsequently filed a lawsuit against Twitter with other plaintiffs. And Twitter recently prevailed, and they prevailed under what's called SLAPP, or Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. Twitter asserted that they have the right to participate in public conversations, and the methods by which they're doing it is by manipulating people's accounts and changing followers and unfollowing and deleting and suspending accounts. And that's very different than Twitter executives just giving their own opinion. The Twitter executives would, certainly be welcome to share their own opinions on their own platform, but instead they're manipulating our accounts, and they do it under the guise of the Twitter community rules. No one knows what these rules are. They don't apply them per any given suspension. It turns out they do have volumes and volumes of written rules. But Twitter, in my view, it's important because it's one of the largest platforms, but also Twitter is, Twitter is a common carrier. And as a common carrier, Twitter should be, outside of Federal Communications Commission types of rules on inappropriate content like nudity or profanity. Twitter should not be trying to censor any political views, any particular scientific information. And paradoxically, you can find on Twitter wide open offensive nudity and profanity, but Twitter disallows advancement of scientific information. I had thousands of posts on my personal Twitter account dealing with abstracts. I had basically made graphical abstracts of advancements peer-reviewed in preprint server system. And my pattern of tweeting was consistent over the last year. So what happened in the last week was there was thousands of followers subtracted and then added back on. And this happened to multiple accounts. And it coincided with the news that Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter was back on. And so, we didn't know what was happening. Multiple people were reporting this. And then on Thursday night of this week, now a few days ago, it's what I call the Thursday night massacre. I finished at the hospital and I started to get all these messages that something happened with my Twitter account. I logged in and all of my 512,000 followers were deleted to zero. My account was zeroed out by Twitter, and then later I got a notice of suspension for violating the community rules. So my tech team and my legal team are basically engaged with Twitter right now in terms of downloading the data, appealing this suspension. I wasn't given any types of warnings. Again, there's no mention of what community rules are violated. And so this act of bold medical censorship, which is, it's clearly that's what it is right in line with a few other pieces of news, including California AB 2098, a law recently signed into into action by Governor Gavin Newsom. This law is known as the doctor muzzle law. That means a doctor cannot freely discuss COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 treatments, treatment of long hauler syndrome, vaccination. Doctors can't do this in any type of free and unfettered manner. And if a doctor is determined by the state medical board of not following this narrative, a government narrative, and no one really knows what the official narrative is, can be lost, and then the doctor's profession, career can be ruined. So the stakes are incredibly high right now. We've never witnessed these types of acts of censorship, violation of free speech, and I've recently responded with some changes in my overall social media presence.
Yeah, so this sounds to me like some dictatorship in China or something. I mean, in my whole life, I have never seen censorship like this in our Western culture. So it's really scary. And I think, that a lot of we obviously need to stand up and do something about this, because I know you're not the only one. I know that Malone got his account suspended, and that was over a month or a year ago. But, to all those doctors and scientists and people out there that are, speaking out on these accounts, what message is this sending them?
Yeah, I had word from my tech team that I was #1 on Twitter's hit list. And of all the doctors involved here, I'm the most published of all the doctors. That means I've reviewed more data, interpreted more. I had more senior editorship positions. I published the most on COVID-19, and also had testified the most under U.S. national and state testimony. And then I've also, I'm in practice. I'm treating patients, so many look to me really as the top medical authority in the world on COVID-19, supported by wonderful colleagues. And I recently went on with Steve Bannon, and Steve, a former White House advisor, and he's very active in the war room media, independent media. Steve said, "Thank goodness for the books." He says all the electronics right now are corrupted. If you do a Google search right now, it's not a fair Google search. It's directing you towards biased sources of information that support mass vaccination, suppress any hope of treatment, suppress any information on vaccine safety. Twitter, the bias is obvious, that Twitter is targeting doctors who are bringing scientific truth forward, and Twitter is allowing those who are advancing a false agenda of safe and effective for the vaccines on their platform. Wikipedia is now, it's a biography service, but it's a falsified biography service. The individuals like myself, I can't control my Wikipedia page. People who I don't even know, anonymous people, are making hundreds and hundreds of entries on my page, which are defamatory and false, certainly statements that I don't approve of. So what Bannon said is, thank goodness for the books. The books are in print. The books are cited, the works of nonfiction. And, my book, Courage to Face COVID-19, which I wrote with John Leake, is now been translated into Swedish. So the wonderful Swedes like yourself, all the Swedish models, I have to tell you, all the Americans idolize the Swedes as some of the most handsome, wonderful people on earth. And what Bannon says is the books are in print. You can hold them. You can look at the citations and understand the evidence that's presented. Ours is 300 pages, about 300 citations, and it's a story. So it's written in a way by a best-selling author, John Leake, in a way that people can understand it, a page-turning story. It's not a medical book, it's a story, but it's nonfiction, and it's a true crime story. And the crimes that have been committed have been fraud and mass negligent homicide. The victims are the patients all over the world who have suffered needlessly in terms of hospitalization and death. And the perpetrators are what we call the biopharmaceutical complex. And we outline who we think they are. They're working as a syndicate. And at the very top is the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, the Rockefeller Foundation, Gavi, CEPI, EcoHealth Alliance, Unitaid, Chinese Communist Party, and then the various government agencies, CDC, NIH, FDA, the EMA, the MHRA, all of them are now working as a syndicate. They've realized that if they can declare a health emergency, that's the reason why the WHO wanted to have the ability to declare worldwide health emergencies independently. They've realized that when they do this, they literally can open the doors of government treasuries and drain them dry. Money is flowing to suppliers. In this case, the vaccine manufacturers, and the money is flowing to suppliers for pre-purchase of products before they're even developed or tested. And this is astonishing. In the United States, our 10% of our GDP was just drained by this biopharmaceutical complex. It's shot us into an inflationary cycle. It's a crime of all time. The number of people now who are injured, disabled, and sadly those who have died with the virus, the pandemic virus, and now with the vaccines on top, that exceeds all wars combined. This is the largest catastrophic event the world has ever faced in modern times.
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. And I think, that's it definitely shows us that Twitter is afraid of something when they don't want the truth to come out. So, and also by banning you, it's giving us a message that, we are under attack when it comes to freedom of speech. And but my question to you about the Twitter part was that we were all hoping that once Elon Musk would take over, that things would ease up a little bit and we would have more freedom of speech than before. And I don't know, what's your thought on that? Because did he take over yet, or do you think that he's aware that your account was taken down, or is he behind that? What do you think?
I hope he reaches out to me and we have a chance to interchange. I'm the only guest on the Joe Rogan Experience that eclipsed Elon Musk in terms of number of views and repeats and clips. And I set all records on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is one of the most extensive podcasts in the world. It's a 3-hour interview, generates a transcript. Reverberations from my interview went all the way to the U.S. White House, commentary by multiple White House staff, the U.S. president, and then across to England, to the royal family and a variety of other stakeholders in Spotify. Spotify was shaken. And this was basically the power of the truth. I showed up with Rogan's interview with data, with slides, and I reviewed them with the Spotify producers ahead of time. And that's all it was. What really rocked their world was just the scientific truth. And that's what I've brought through Twitter. So I hope Musk and his team will reach out. I'm happy to dialogue with them. We simply can't allow the largest social media platform to censor top scientists. It simply can't happen when this is scientific information. The only person and the only people who can verify the validity of scientific information are those in medical authority. And I'm one of them, if not the top. So, this is very, very important for the world to hear. It's not like I can go to somebody else and ask, is this correct? I mean, in many ways, I'm the court of last appeals. I'm the most published person in my field in the world in history. I've applied all that scholarship to SARS-CoV-2. I have quite a range. I work with a team that helps out in terms of the preclinical sciences, that helps in terms of epidemiology. I've formed many teams through various types of lists, and now I've started a Substack with true crime author John Leake, because Substacks are a wonderful way of communicating, but the ones that are best are written by the best writers. There's no doubt about it. On our back cover of our book, Michael Capuzzo, who writes the Rescue Substack, he's been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize 6 times. And so, I think what people need to look at in Substacks is the quality of the writing and the accuracy. And so, I got my first one out in a few hours. I've just absolutely blown away with thousands and thousands of subscribers right away. But this is very important. The world needs to understand, and certainly the biopharmaceutical complex needs this reality check, that they can't stop the truth. It's impossible. It's impossible. I've been on Daystar now 4 times. Daystar is the largest Christian broadcasting network. They have operations in 145 countries. They have 200 million paid subscribers, and they estimate multiple people watch their programming across the range of programs. I've estimated I've touched 1.7 billion people with messaging 4 times over. That's more than any government official can possibly do. The range of media now, the independent media, can't be stopped. And people are going to be leaving and are leaving mainstream media. They may be leaving Twitter and other social media platforms if Musk and others can't right the ship and get back to freedom of speech, get back to eliminating censorship as a threat to the viability of media, and helping the world move on. This crisis has been very difficult for everyone, and the only people who can bring it to the close are those who are bringing the world the clinical realities and the medical truth.
Yes, exactly. And freedom of speech is a human right, and something that democratic societies should definitely continue supporting. So we're not giving up on that one for sure. But so when I saw that you also created a new account, of course, I think it's super important to continue fighting to get back on Twitter and all these other social media platforms, because it's our given rights. But where can people find you now? Meanwhile, we're in this fight.
Yeah, one of the best things to look for is what's called the link tree. So I have a link tree. It's a website. So it's petermcculloughmd.com, just all together, petermcculloughmd.com. And that'll take you through a series of buttons to all the social media: Getter, Truth Social, Facebook, my LinkedIn account, our book, Courage to Face COVID-19. And then we're adding now a link to our Substack. So the link tree is very important. Now in Twitter, I've had a prior account since 2018. I left it inactive. I asked my tech team if I should fire that up, and they said no. Right now, Twitter is starting to back off. They're responding to my teams in terms of negotiating a way forward. And so this isn't over, but it's clearly taking unnecessary time and resources from professionals. It's not needed. My tweeting pattern hasn't changed. I've said nothing offensive. Everything's been scientifically accurate. In each one of my tweets received dozens and dozens and dozens of comments. We did catch Twitter about a month ago automatically unfollowing people. So on my feed per day, millions of people are on my feed. But Twitter's keeping it down to about 500,000 because they're unfollowing people. And so we actually now have to put in my description a notice: watch out for automatic unfollow, enable notifications. All of these things have to be done because Twitter has basically been running a countermeasure campaign against me, in a sense, a propaganda information technology campaign against me, bringing the world the truth.
Which is unbelievable. And it's such a, it's just, I can't believe that this is happening in our times, but we're here, and of course we're going to do everything in our power, because it's about everything. It's about journalism, it's about investigative journalism, it's about freedom of speech, it's about actually the truth coming out to save more lives in this humanitarian crisis. So it's truly important that we all come together now more than ever, to fight this, because it's happening in our lifetime. And I would never, 10 years ago, someone would ask me about this, I would never ever imagine that something like this could happen in our Western culture, but it is happening. And I know you also, you did talk, I know that the US started with the COVID vaccination of young children. In Sweden, we actually just recently, I think it was just a few days ago, the Swedish CDC decided that actually they're not even going to recommend the shot for 12 to 17-year-olds. So they took that off, which I thought was, a great thing because it made me very happy. But I know Brazil is there now, the US. What are you seeing, in terms of, because I know that there has been some deaths, and I haven't looked into the data yet, but what can you tell us about that?
Well, we have a lot of news on the front of pediatric and adolescent vaccination in the news. In the last few days, there was a press release from the family of Sean Casten. Sean Casten is a Democratic Congress member of Congress from Illinois. His 17-year-old daughter, which he now concedes was vaccinated, he had tweeted tremendously about supporting vaccines. Him and his family are going to get vaccinated. His kids are going to get vaccinated. Sadly, his 17-year-old daughter, perfectly healthy, dies in her sleep. And now he disclosed this week it was determined to be a cardiac arrhythmia as the cause of death. And I can tell you as a cardiologist, in a perfectly healthy child who dies of a cardiac arrhythmia, who's been vaccinated, I can tell you that is due to the COVID-19 vaccines until proven otherwise, because the COVID-19 vaccines, our FDA agrees, they cause heart damage, myocarditis, and the heart damage leaves a scar, and the scar can be the source of the arrhythmia, the abnormal heart rhythm that goes around the scar. It develops an arrhythmia called ventricular tachycardia, and that can degenerate to ventricular fibrillation and sudden death very quickly. The two time periods where we're seeing this is in young people and young adults on the athletic playing field with a surge of adrenaline during sports, but also during sleep, particularly early in the morning, where there is a surge of again, catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, and also a surge of cortisol. That's part of the normal waking process. That's when we're seeing these deaths. So everybody listening to this should be aware that when they hear about a death in a young person and it's unknown cause, the first question to ask is, did they take a COVID-19 vaccine? Which one and when did they take it? Recently, a paper by Patone and colleagues published in Circulation, our best cardiology journal from the UK, they're reporting 100 fatal cases of myocarditis, fatal cases in young people in the UK. And so I agree with Swedish authorities. They should absolutely positively not administer the vaccines to young people. And now in the last 3 days or so, Florida Surgeon General Joe Ladapo, the Harvard-trained doctor who was brought in to Florida to lead healthcare under Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's been a real beacon for civil liberties in the United States. Ladapo, with his own analysis, has declared the state of Florida will not support vaccination for young people age 18 to 39. Previously, they had stated nobody younger than that, but now 18 to 39 men. Now he specifies men based on this risk of myocarditis. 90% of myocarditis occurs in men. This heart damage, we can't understate it. A paper by Manoogian and colleagues, the first prospective cohort study from Bangkok, Thailand, found that at least half the cases are asymptomatic. The kids don't feel it. And the first manifestation may be this sudden death on the playing field or during other walks of life or in sleep. But all the life insurance companies, sadly, among working age people is seen as skyrocketing in life insurance claims. They claim it's not due to COVID, the respiratory illness. The only other smoking gun out there has been widespread mass vaccination.
And what is the vaccine uptake in very young children? Because they started from 6 months, right? Are you seeing actually parents vaccinating their young kids against COVID?
Well, the variation in policy across the United States is striking. So Florida is saying no vaccination in children at all. Now they've extended it to young adults 18 to 39 men. The school district of Washington, D.C. has mandated it for all children grades kindergarten through grade 12. And they said if they don't take the vaccine, they won't even get online learning at home. That's even a child who has a fatal allergy just literally has to take the vaccine and potentially die with the vaccine in order to go to school. Governor Gavin Newsom, the same governor who signed the Dr. COVID muzzle law, has vowed to make vaccination mandatory in all California public schools. So you can't find a more disparate situation now in terms of policy. What our CDC is telling us, and we'll just take it at face value, they're telling us that 82% of Americans took at least one shot. The number that at any time was fully vaccinated is about 2/3. Many people take one shot and say, forget it, they're not going to take any more. But 2/3 is a solid number for people who took the vaccine. That's adults. Now, of those, a third of that 2/3 went on to get a booster of some sort. Okay, so they were fully vaccinated, get a booster. Now, only those who are fully vaccinated would be eligible for the new bivalent booster. So again, it's a fraction of a fraction, and we're told that uptake is about 5% or less. So it's 5% of 2/3 at best. So we're talking about, maybe 2% of the general adult population taking the bivalent boosters. Americans were very disappointed to see the bivalent boosters failed in animals to protect them, had a surrogate rise of antibodies, which is obviously not trustable since it doesn't correlate with the clinical protection, and then no human studies on efficacy or safety. We estimate that of any pediatric uptake, it's below 2%, that Americans, families have just not brought in their children. And I think what happened to Sean Casten's daughter is going to be just another reminder that this is the riskiest type of vaccination a child could ever face for no benefit, because we know children have very mild syndromes. They don't have severe outcomes. It's easily treatable. The more dangerous mutant strains of the virus are past, and we now have very mild strains. We're on the after curve of the Omicron outbreak. Hospitals are largely empty. Early treatment is easier and easier. Most patients now are just treated with over-the-counter regimens. The most important question that we should ask is, has a patient already had COVID? Because if they've already had COVID, the next infection, the second or third infections, are characteristically mild. They're of negligible risk. They're managed with over-the-counter medications. The most important question is not whether or not someone took a vaccine, which quickly goes out of date in 6 months, but did they have the prior infection? A paper by Kimatelli and colleagues shows, very, very substantial protection, 97% protection against hospitalization and death, and it doesn't wane over time. It's over 15 months of observation. So natural infection, natural immunity, far better than a vaccine, far more meaningful. So many people have been pounded on the vaccines, but they never even have been asked if they've had the infection, which is a far more important question.
Yes, absolutely. And I think most doctors I speak to nowadays are saying that, the herd immunity and going through it with your immune system is like absolutely one of the best and safest ways, right? And plus we all know, and I think, many of us and even like those people who are aware have been using all the protocols that you and your colleagues have suggested, and it's been working. People are getting better. Early treatment has worked. I haven't heard about anyone that got sicker or had like some severe complications when they were using the protocols that have been, suggested by you and other doctors. So this is a terrible, terrible situation we're in, because it's absolutely horrifying what happened and how they started imposing this injection on people.
Well, let me just give some supportive data to what you just said. A recent survey published by Verdkirk and colleagues has demonstrated that only those who were denied or didn't receive early treatment, only those individuals were hospitalized or died with COVID all the way through. So any forms of early treatment, any forms, seemed to keep people out of the hospital. It was amazingly effective on a population basis. On my podcast, America Out Loud Talk Radio McCullough Report, I go all over the world and talk to experts. I've recently had a long format interview with Dr. Eugenia Maria Barrentios from El Salvador, a fearless doctor who treated thousands of patients, never wore a mask, was unafraid, and she did not use ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine-based protocols. She was able to find protocols that didn't use antivirals, that relied upon antihistamines, other anti-inflammatories, corticosteroids, and anticoagulants, and she got people through the illness. Now, she was very prompt in starting therapy, and she relied on labs, which is interesting. We typically don't get a lot of labs in the United States on COVID, but she did, and was able to risk stratify. She said only 10% of people really need treatment on a community level. I'd also interviewed Dr. Sankarit Chetty, who practices outside of Durban, South Africa, and independently, he arrived at very similar protocols. No need for ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. They've never had access to Paxlovid or molnupiravir, and yet they found ways to treat COVID and get people through the illness. It makes sense that if the intensity and the duration of symptoms can be reduced and the edge can be taken off the illness, then patients don't end up in the hospital. And nearly everybody who died with COVID, they died in the hospital as part of this hospitalization. There's a lot of complications that happen in the hospital. It's all about staying out of the hospital and managing at home. Patients, we use home oxygen. The low oxygen saturation or hypoxemia is well tolerated at home. We've published that. Dr. Sabine Hazen has published that. And a recent guest on my podcast, Dr. Jackie Stone from Zimbabwe, has also published on this, that severely hypoxemic patients can be managed as an outpatient. So, I have to tell you, COVID-19 has been a worldwide crisis. It does take a worldwide conversation to navigate us through the response. My frustration in the United States is the major media is giving no window to the outside world. How is it like in Sweden? Does the Swedish press give any view to the outside world and how they're managing COVID?
Yes, they. Well, I mean, most of the stuff comes from the authorities and WHO and other places. Yes, they do report on some countries here and there, but is it transparent? Is there a dialogue? No, I wouldn't say that. Are they? There is maybe there has been a few stories about the vaccine injuries, but they're just like everyone else. They're talking about everything else that the mainstream media is supposed to be saying in accordance to WHO and those other institutions. We never got into, and we are great proof of that it actually works without all of these measures, right? But no, the media is still not talking the way they should be doing. We are also being censored here. We are being called, of course, right extremists and just misinformation people. We also have a law that was signed recently about misinformation that could be seen as terrorism. So we're not far behind there. I just think that it's not as easy in the system to pull off something in the same way maybe as in the United States or other countries.
Well, I want to respond to this term misinformation. I think this has no place in clinical medicine or the biomedical sciences at all. I can tell you as a highly published scientist and doctor, the term misinformation has never come into our lexicon. There simply are scientific data. There's scientific data, and there's two or more, many times many more, interpretive points of view. There's no such thing as misinformation. There's simply a scientific observation or a scientific discovery, and then our response to it. So this claim of information or misinformation, that actually is out of the old playbook of Goebbels and colleagues who ran the propaganda office for Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. This declaration of information or misinformation, now people have other terms, disinformation, this is actually attempts at censorship. It's a formalizing censorship. It's a propaganda. It's a very aggressive propaganda move. I can tell you, no person or no organization has agency over the truth. This idea that someone controls the truth and nobody else has the truth outside of a particular organization, I think people should immediately bristle at that claim and then respond to it with a very vigorous rejection of this concept of misinformation. I'll never forget when the Prime Minister of New Zealand pronounced that the New Zealand government will be the single source of information on the pandemic. And here I am as a practicing doctor. I'm seeing COVID-19 patients. I'm doing research. I'm filing grants, investigational drug applications. We're publishing our findings. Really? The government of New Zealand is going to be the single source of COVID-19 information for the people of New Zealand, as if they are not going to go out on the internet and learn more about the illness as it's evolving. It's a novel coronavirus. These types of statements are stunning. And I think historians will record them as obvious opportunities for censorship, including this California bill I mentioned, AB 2098. How is the California Medical Board possibly going to proclaim what is information or what is misinformation? It's a rapidly evolving pandemic. COVID is a complicated illness now. Do you know, as a doctor, I can use long-acting monoclonal antibodies called Evusheld as a product in place of a vaccine if I want to. I have a whole range of antivirals, other anti-inflammatories. We have patients with long COVID, then getting superimposed SARS-CoV-2 infection. We have vaccinated patients developing the infection and getting blood clots. It is so complicated. How in the world is the medical board going to determine, quote, information? And how are they possibly going to discipline a doctor for, quote, misinformation? This is going to be a witch hunt. I know what it's all about. This is going to be a complaint-driven system where there'll be various stakeholders who say, you know what, I don't like what this doctor's view is on this particular form of treatment. I'm going to file a complaint, and that doctor's going to lose their livelihood under this California law. I can tell you what doctors are going to do. They are going to categorically not discuss COVID. They are not going to treat patients with COVID or vaccine injuries or long COVID. And the people who will suffer will be the patients.
Which is very dangerous right now, right? That's like the biggest danger we're facing. So I think, as soon as, you see that there is no open dialogue about something, that's a red flag to me. I've learned that very well in university when I was studying political psychology. But it's super scary, and I think it's super important to also inspire and encourage people to speak even louder right now in these times, because it's really important that we don't allow this to happen, right?
It's true. You and I are lucky. We're able to use independent media to express our views. I've had personal conversations with the Screen Actors Guild of all the actors and talented people in Hollywood. They don't feel comfortable expressing their views. You don't see anyone expressing their views in that group. The same thing with the National Football League and the major sports teams. They don't feel comfortable expressing their views. So many doctors who are in large medical institutions, they don't independently come out in their analysis. I would imagine the Karolinska Institute, which is held out to be one of the premier medical organizations in the world, I bet there's little independent opinions coming out from Karolinska doctors. What do you say?
No, absolutely, 100%. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they were the one that did the study on HPV a few years ago, and it actually showed that after they started administering the vaccine, the cancer rate went up, which should be impossible if a vaccine is supposed to help with cervical cancer. But that study was taken down within a few months. So I don't know who did it and who was behind them taking it down, but you can't find it anymore. And I think I still have it somewhere, or I know people who do, but that's exactly what happens, right? And then now if I go in and Google, I only find studies that are pro, like that are actually saying the opposite. So when these things happen, you just like you see that something is not right. And Karolinska is, you know, they're just like all the other institutions. They get money from certain pharmaceutical companies or other companies that you know make, and then they do the studies that they're asked to do. And I think, you know, there's a lot of corruption going on, of course. Although you know, every once in a while, I think someone manages to get some information out, and of course, then later maybe it's taken down. But at least, you know, they manage to do that. So you see that people are trying, at least, you know, to do something, or get the truth out in some ways. But I wanted to ask you too, Peter, like, you know, with this happening right now with Twitter and everything, we see the censorship. Doctor, I mean, I think, and I do want to do that one day, like a campaign for doctors that are being, you know, banned and have their livelihoods threatened, and, you know, everything that's being done to you. I mean, I'm extremely grateful for all the work that you all are doing out there, and that you're standing up. You're standing up for humanity, and you're continuing this fight, even though some of you I know lost everything. To me, that's like, you know, you, including the vaccine injured that are speaking out, are modern day heroes to me. But what's your solution? I mean, like, what do you see in the future? What do we all need to do in order for this to stop?
Well, we're seeing a phenomenon. You know, in my book, there's a chapter called The Stripping, and it's just describing what's happened to me professionally, being stripped of, you know, employment, of editorships, of National Institutes of Health committee positions, pharmaceutical consulting arrangements, being stripped of, you know, I was the president of a major medical society. The society was dissolved, stripped of professorships, all with no due process. You know, no courtesy call, no explanation, no dialogue. You know, faculty positions. There's a faculty senate where there has to be some type of a due process. None of this. It's coming through emails or certified letters. I have over $1 million lawsuit from the health system I walk into every day. They have over $1 million lawsuit against me based on a false claim that I'm bringing their name into the media. Well, you can listen to this interview. Their name isn't brought into the media. My views are only mine and mine alone. But you know what's happening to the doctors who are speaking truth, the patients who have developed vaccine injuries, disabilities, the families of those who've lost patients, both with COVID and with the vaccine. You know what's happening? With each and every one of these stripping events, we're getting stronger. Our strength is ever increasing. And it's almost like you just, you know, have you ever gone outside and you saw, you know, a weed, and you tried to pluck the weed out of the garden, and the weed just grows up in 4 more areas and becomes stronger? That's basically what this is. You can't stop the truth. It's very, very important. St. Augustine said, listen, the truth is like a lion. Let it out and roam. It can defend itself. You know, I remain bold and relentless. I cannot be stopped. You cannot be stopped. What each and every person can do is have a conversation with someone else. Let them understand the viewpoints. I think when everybody sees their doctor, this is important. When everyone sees their doctor, they should, you know, if it's not brought up, they should ask their doctor, should I take one of these COVID vaccines? And if the doctor says yes, you know, a response can be, listen, I've looked at it, and I don't think they're safe enough for me. Just leave it there. Don't argue any types of facts or scientific data. Just give the perception. The patient's feeling's important. And if the doctor says, well, yeah, they're safe. I say, listen, doctor, they may be safe enough for you. Why don't you go ahead and take some more? But I'm not going to take it. And doctors need to hear that all day long. You know, I have patients tell me that cholesterol-lowering medicines are not safe. I have patients tell me all day long blood pressure-lowering medications and others. I have patients tell me all the time their concerns on safety. What patients have not done loud enough is tell their doctors their concern over vaccine safety. It needs to be brought up over and over again. Vaccine safety needs to be a common conversation in the lobby of clinics and hospitals, in the examination room. needs to be a common topic of discussion throughout the independent media. You know, this weekend on America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report, my guest was Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, who's dedicated her professional career to the critical evaluation of vaccine safety and efficacy. And it was interesting because I'm a doctor and I've taken all the vaccines according to the schedule, even from childhood. My mother dutifully took me in to take all the vaccines. Now, and I haven't taken the COVID-19 vaccine, nor will I, but I took all of them up until that point. And Dr. Tenpenny took none of the vaccines. She grew up in a family where she took none. So we had completely different viewpoints on the vaccines. And it's a great dialogue. Tune in on America Out Loud Talk Radio. You can always pick it up on the podcast network and the archives. But what she made me understand is that the vaccines as they exist today are vulnerable. The vaccines are vulnerable for the following reasons. Many of the current vaccines are for legacy problems that are now easily treatable, like diphtheria, pertussis, even Clostridium tetani infections are readily treated with antibiotics. That many of the other vaccines, in fact, never were tested in clinical trials to improve outcomes. They actually didn't have a level of scientific evidence that they actually blocked a specific infection or prevented transmission or reduced severity. And what none of them had is none of them had adequate information on safety. None. And so safety data has come out through spontaneous reporting and also aggregate reporting. And there's a great need. What we concluded is there's a great need to reevaluate the entire vaccine schedule, particularly ones that are given indiscriminately. You know, if vaccines are targeted, just like medicines would be targeted for at-risk groups, I think people could all accept that. But, you know, now, you know, babies being born on day one, getting the hepatitis B antigen vaccine. I mean, this is extended in a hyperbolic manner. You know, when I was born, there was only 3 vaccines. And now children are facing like 72 administrations or more. Things have hyperbolically gotten out of control with respect to vaccines. The COVID-19 vaccine debacle has really brought this into public view. Many people now are questioning vaccines overall.
Yes, that must have been. I want to watch that interview. It sounds super interesting. So, would you say that 5 years ago you would not have even thought about vaccines being an issue, and now, with this COVID thing, it made you rethink some of the stuff or previous knowledge about it?
Yeah, well, let me give you a clear example. This is an easy example. The influenza vaccine. Influenza vaccine. You know, my hospital asks me to take an influenza vaccine every year. And I look at it, I'm a man, 60 years old, but I'm healthy. I'm a runner. I don't, I'm strong. I honestly don't feel any threat from influenza. And what I learned in my interview from Dr. Tenpenny, if you look at all the viral upper respiratory tract infections that happen in the wintertime, only 14% are actually test positive for influenza. And then among them, it's a minority who are at high risk. So there's a tiny fraction who would ever even need an influenza vaccine, but not young, healthy people. And what I learned is that in a publication by Chung and colleagues, MMWR, in 2022, they reported on the efficacy in the United States of the influenza vaccine. The calculated vaccine efficacy was only 16%. Only 16%, and that was statistically insignificant from 0. So I am telling you, from the CDC itself, they are telling us the influenza vaccine is a bust. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. We need at least 50% vaccine efficacy. It clearly has to be different than 0 and statistically significant, and it has to be safe. I can tell you right now, based on efficacy, I'm not taking the influenza vaccine. I'm not going to take something in my body that has a 0 chance of giving me benefit, because it just gives me the risk of some type of immunologic reaction that could go wrong. And it's right in the package insert of the influenza vaccine, all the various things that can go wrong. That's a simple example. So every vaccine, in my view, should be given according to risk and not indiscriminately. And every vaccine should be given according to risks and benefits. So this is very different than a blanket vaccine agenda for all. And that vaccinate all is really the mantra of the biopharmaceutical complex. In our book, I really want everybody in Sweden to pick up a copy of the Swedish translation of our book, Courage to Face COVID-19, Preventing Hospitalizations and Deaths While Battling the Biopharmaceutical Complex. In the book, we spend time on CEPI. CEPI is a Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. It was formed by the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum. It said there will only be one response to infectious disease threats, and that is mass indiscriminate vaccination. I think everybody needs to read the book and understand what's going on. I'm going to have to let that be the last word and sign off, but thank you so much for having me on the program.
Yes, Peter, thank you so much. I will make sure to put up all the information about your book and everything in the article. And so always nice to speak to you. And thank you for everything that you're doing. It's we're all grateful, that you keep up the fight. And I hope this Twitter thing will resolve itself soon, and you'll get back there.
All I can tell you is that Twitter has made me even bigger and stronger. Every act of censorship that attempts to strike down someone makes them even stronger, more resilient, more influential. Thank you.